Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Monday gave a clarion call for a global people's movement to bring about a behavioral change to deal with climate changes as he made a path-breaking pledge to more than double India's non-fossil fuel target to 450 gigawatts. It comes a day after Prime Minister Modi and US President Donald Trump shared the stage at a gala event in Houston on Sunday and displayed a close friendship and a common vision on fighting terrorism. But the US and India differ on the issue of climate change. Trump withdrew from the Paris climate deal in 2017 and blamed India and China for this decision, saying the agreement was unfair as it would have made the US pay for nations which benefited the most from the deal. Meanwhile, teenage climate activist Greta Thunberg had one question for the global leaders assembled at the United Nations: how dare you? On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the climate crisis and the way forward. Joining me on the program today are Nitin Desai, Chairman, the Energy and Resources Institute; Shamli Singh, Assistant Professor, Centre for Environment and Climate Change, Indian Institute of Public Administration; and Sandeep Sen, Senior Journalist and Author. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. So Desai, I'd like to begin the program with you. As far as climate is concerned, how serious are the world leaders today in trying to tackle this particular problem?
I regret to say that with the exception perhaps of our own country, I don't see that evidence. If you look at the record of particularly the large countries, the G20 countries, there is a carbon tracker which evaluates the adequacy of the pledges which have been made by countries as to whether they are sufficient for the 2 degrees centigrade target or insufficient or highly insufficient. India is the only G20 country whose pledge is considered sufficient. Not by us, by an independent international evaluatory organization called Carbon Tracker Initiative. And I'm very happy to see that we have doubled our targets on renewable. And I would say that, frankly, we are doing a great deal. We're certainly doing as much as what we should be expected to do when it comes to issues like renewable energy and energy efficiency. And it's good. It's time to act. Where I would say we need to now worry about, and I'm happy that the government is focused on action, on getting things done. What I think is increasingly necessary in India is to basically not just now we'll leave it at the general awareness that climate is changing, but do much more serious work on what it will mean at a local level. It's not going to mean the same thing, for instance, in different river basins. The impact of potential climate change on the different river basins is going to be different. We need localized information so that people can start taking it into account in local decisions about water use, about land use, about where things will be located, and so on and so forth. And second, much more work on science and technology for climate change, much more work than what we are doing now, because that is what is really necessary. So I think we are probably some of the good guys, if you like, in the global scene. But we can do more to help our own people on the adaptation side, because some change will be there. And I think that lady who spoke, the young girl who spoke about, is perfectly right. The world is leaving our children and grandchildren with a huge ecological debt.
Sure.
A huge ecological debt. Let me not, because really one small example of this. There is a calculation called at what point and what day did the world use up the capacity of nature to renew itself. It was about mid-December, 30 years ago. This year it was 29th of July. Which means all our consumption beyond 29th of July globally is creating a debt. It amounts to ecological saving. So my point is that girl was absolutely right. How do we dare to leave our children with this debt? And I'm glad that she said that so vigorously and so forcefully. And I'm also rather happy that our country is probably doing a little bit more than what people can expect compared to what the other big countries are doing.
Sure. All right. So, Sandeep, sir, let me bring you to the picture now. I'm going to take off from where Nitin Desai left. The issue that youngsters, do you believe that youngsters are getting more and more involved as far as climate change is concerned? Are they doing enough to, raise the kind of awareness that is needed? Greta Thunberg, of course, is doing her bit. But is it important that others too join that bandwagon and take this movement forward?
Yes, of course, youngsters are very important. And frankly, youngsters all over the world are not doing enough. Because we have reached a situation where if we don't do something in the next 5 to 10 years, there's going to be disaster. Let me go back a little bit. This climate change problem has been there for last 50 years. Last 20-25 years we have been talking about COP conferences, where there was an emphasis on reduction of carbon through carbon trading. So it was actually it was giving an incentive to the fossil fuel companies to reduce carbon emissions. There was no direct challenger over there. Renewable energy was discovered 50 years ago. The first electric car in US was produced 50 years ago. But the lobby of the fossil fuels ensured that renewable energy did not grow. It is only in the last few years, unless you have a replacement of fossil fuels, you cannot reduce carbon. And it is only in the last few years, under the leadership of China and then India, I will always put China ahead because they have made the maximum effort. And China and India have made the maximum effort because we are energy deficient countries and we cannot afford so much of fossil fuel. You see, we are a country which has 18% of population, but we consume only 6% of the energy resources of the world. So if we have to grow our energy resources and if we have to use fossil fuels, then we will burn up the entire world. So the only alternative for us is renewable energy, and that has happened in the last 4-5 years tremendously. You see, if you see in 2014, we produced just 2.6 gigawatts of solar power. By 2018, we produced 9 gigawatts of solar power. The capacity was increased to 175 gigawatts. The future capacity was increased to 175 gigawatts, which has now been doubled to 450 or 425 gigawatts. So we have grown our solar and wind energy capacities, and that is a positive step. That is doing something. Preaching is, you see, Prime Minister Modi also said that preaching is a different ball game, and when you do something, you really show the way. So India has been showing the way. Even in energy efficiency, we have been showing the way. If you see our Ujjwala scheme or the LED scheme, etc., we saved about 100 million units of carbon. So India has been showing the way. We have been doing our bit, and I think the younger generation has to now take the challenge to lift the entire thing.
Yes, take it up a notch, basically.
Yes, take it up, not only notch, it has to take it up to a greater extent.
Sure.
For that, we have to educate our students.
Absolutely. All right. So let's talk, taking the point that you made forward, I want to focus on this issue of replacement for fossil fuels. Of course, India has been acting, India has been showing the way. We also have the International Solar Alliance, collaboration with France and so on and so forth. So we have been showing the world the way, and the Prime Minister has also made a clarion call asking everyone to act right now. So as far as replacement of fossil fuels are concerned, in its truest sense, do we have it?
If you talk of the technology, as we are talking about India, definitely we have the technology. But yes, there needs to be a lot of research and development, because if you have asked for the 175 gigawatts to be doubled to 450 gigawatts in the coming years of 2050, then definitely there needs to be a lot of research and development on the front of renewable energies such as solar energy, wind, hydel and small hydros. and also taking the call of the Prime Minister Modi of entering into the initiatives such as your International Solar Alliance, wherein all the countries, the sunshine countries between the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn, they have pledged together to come up with the renewable energy, to tap the solar energy. And also not only on the renewable energy front, if you look at the amount of money that is being used or utilized, or I would rather say wasted, on the on getting out of the disaster whenever we have a disaster, in the case of extreme events. So we, though India has been applauded for the zero casualty approach, but still much has not done as far as the loss of property is concerned. So coming up with initiatives such as CDRI, that is the Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, and International Solar Alliance. So India can be a soft power in this and can take a lead in the direction. And of course, despite being the lobbies, as has been discussed by the co-panelists, but then the future it lies with the non-renewable energy sources, and they can be tapped, and most of the energy needs can be met. We have a lot of integrated energy resources these days, where there is a blend of the renewable and the non-renewable. We have come up with the mixture of ethanol and the conventional fuels, and a lot of research has been done, and lot of piloting has been done. But as has been said, that the time has now come to come out of that pilot mode, the pilot stage, to act, to bring it as at a full-fledged scale for the betterment of the masses, and a movement. Of course, India is doing very good, as has been discussed, but if one nation does it, it is a practice. But if all of us collaborate and collate together, it will become a movement.
Okay, all right. So, Mr. Desai, as has been discussed, India and China have been doing their bit and have been, taking this particular movement forward. How do we get the others on board? Because we've seen that they've been iffy really as far as climate change is concerned.
I would say that basically the real challenge now is to get the developed countries, United States, Canada, Europe, Japan, Australia on board. Amongst the G19, they are the laggards. Incidentally, China is a laggard. In terms of what I was talking about, the carbon tracker, the evaluation of China's pledge under the Paris Agreement is highly insufficient, is the terminology used, whereas India's is clearly in the sufficient category. So I think it should be very clear that yes, they are doing a lot on the renewables, on electric vehicles, and many other areas, but they did only even more than what they are doing now, because their rate of consumption is way, way, way beyond ours. And in our case, I think fortunately we've had a long tradition and a period of building of awareness there. Remember that we basically, it was Manmohan Singh who made the pledge at the G10 meeting, that India will ensure that its per capita consumption never exceeds the global average. That was a commitment that was made, and then the National Action Plan on Climate Change was arrived. Now let's focus on what are we doing, which is good, and I think certainly pushing the decarbonization agenda to reduce carbon emissions is one area, and renewable energy, energy efficiency, a lot of work needs to be done, and that is one. But I think we also need to recognize the adaptation side. The point that she made, about disaster is very important. Let us be realistic. The fact is that even with 2 degrees, if the world somehow manages to stay within 2 degrees, right now it doesn't look like that. Right now it seems to be more on a 3.5 degree path. We are going to get more rain on fewer days, periods of floods and droughts, which will become more frequent. So I think the point that is being raised about better preparedness for what is likely to happen, also better research. Is ICR doing enough research on the crop varieties that you will need with more uncertainty in the pattern of rainfall? That it's not just the amounts, it's the uncertainty which will go up. Are we doing enough work on designing our buildings for a much hotter climate? without having to create a new carbon problem. Somebody wrote that, with global heating, everybody will use more air conditioning, which will generate even more carbon. So India is committed to an international, to a cooling plan, and my organization is a little involved in preparing for that. So I would say that the time for action is now. I'm happy that the focus is coming on action, on specifics, renewable energy, climate, an action plan on cooling. But I think we need to do much more on the science, technology and research side than what we've been doing. That 7th, 8th program, the National Action Plan on Climate Change and Science and Technology, I haven't heard much about what is happening there. Finally, whether we like it or not, carbon sequestration is going to be required. And a key part of that is on the forestry green cover side. And I think we need a very active monitoring of the extent of green cover. It's not bad, actually. There was a NASA study which actually showed that India and China account for about 1/3 of the increase in global green cover over the past 20 years. So that's not bad, but we need to be more, there needs to be more focused, more systematic, and most important, localized, much more localized information.
Sure.
And that is what I would like to see now.
Sure. Okay. So, Sandeep Sen, clearly there's scope to do more. What should our focus areas be going forward?
See, I have a very limited approach to this entire thing. If you make something profitable, everybody goes for it. Today, renewable energy prices are touching the prices of coal, not oil. Fossil fuel new plants, coal plants, are not going to happen in a big way because the renewable energy prices have fallen 3 times, 4 times in the last 5 years. This is going to be disruptive. Renewable energy prices are going to fall to 1 rupee per unit, which will be much lower than coal. And that is when the entire disruption will start. Just like if you remember the data disruption which started 50 years ago, when data prices were very high, data speeds were low. Similarly, there is going to be energy disruption with renewable energy. Renewable energy is going to have such a big impact, I believe, that in the next 10 years, you will be finding solutions which are far more than expected. Because it is a business and it's a profitable solution today. It is cheaper, it will ultimately become much cheaper to buy renewable energy. So everywhere, in every gadget, there will be solar batteries, there will be solar charge powered this thing. So this is going to have a disruptive change, and that is going to change the entire. I am not very pessimistic about this climate change thing. I believe that technology is bringing us to that tipping point where we will be able to control things. The way we are going and the way technology is going, I think there is going to be a shift that we will ultimately be forced to change into non-fossils, not because of carbon, but because non-fossils are more profitable and cheaper to buy.
Right. Yes, Mr.
Desai. Slight caution. Yes, I think this is true, but there's much more work needs to be done in redesigning electricity systems and so on.
Yes.
But before one gets carried away with the optimism, one of my disturbing features of the world today is that half the carbon which is out there in the atmosphere was emitted after 1990, when we signed and started the climate convention process. Yes. It is after the governments recognized there is a problem. Half the carbon out there has come since then. So I would say that basically there is a lot of talk, but where is the evidence of action? Are the people taking things seriously? Yes, we have any number of meetings, any number of large and international NGOs talking about climate. I would say that we need to see action, and we need to now translate the commitment on reducing carbon footprints from a very global type of number to something which goes down right up to the corporate level.
Sure.
No?
Sure, yes. So, Shamli Singh, as far as measures are concerned, are there any quick fixes? What do we need to do in the immediate short term?
There are many number of quick fixes that we can do at the individual level, which will, as he said, which will bring you the quantified, verifiable results. Say for example, there has been a lot of talk about the ban of the single-use plastic. Definitely this will create a benefit and a boom to the environmental side. But besides that, if you look at the climate change aspect of it, a lot of plastic waste which is generated is being eventually dumped into the landfills because of the improper segregation. We are not able to recycle. So if you look at the transportation cost which goes into it, that also involves a lot of carbon footprinting because of the use of the fossil fuels. So one immediate approach would be to contribute to the lesser use, or in fact to no use of the single-use plastic. Secondly, we should think local and act also locally. No need to go for high fancy stuff. Try and adopt and adapt to the locally grown produces. That will also reduce the carbon footprints. Thirdly, I would also like to emphasize that we do crib about the amount of, the luggage we can carry in our aircrafts and the airliners. But it is limited to 15 kgs in some, and maybe to an extent of 25 kgs. But the way we fly, that also reflects a lot. That also reduces the carbon footprints of the same, and the height at which we fly, because the aviation industry, the aviation sector has a lot, it produces a lot of carbon related footprints. So these are the small minor steps which we can adopt and which can be quantified. There are applications, there are trackers by which we can see that okay, in a span of 1 year we have been able to downsize our carbon consumption, our carbon emission. So it can be piloted, it can be shown, as you were discussing, how the other countries can be brought in loop. It can be shown as a prototype that yes, if one country can, why can't the other nations? And if it will bring a major change, I'm sure other nations will too join. And I would
I'm
also,
a little intrigued by this airline carbon footprint. So the higher you fly, the better, or the lower you fly, better?
There is a zone in which if you fly, if the higher you go, it will be more pressurizing on the fuel. But the problem is that there are the airspaces are not, I mean, you cannot fly wherever you can feel like, but then there are turbulences and other issues in that. So you have to be diligently selective in which zone you are flying.
Okay.
And also, as we were discussing about China, though China has, though it is lagging behind in India, I do agree, but China has declared its peaking year of 2030. India is yet to declare that peaking year. So we have to be cautious and careful on that also.
Sure. All right. Closing comments now from all my guests with the best way forward. Starting first with you, Sandeep sir.
See, single-use plastic is very important, as Dr. Shamli said. It is one of the key, it is going to be one of the key game changers. Now here, once we have this technology over here, that we have to replace single-use plastic, and how to reduce what is the single-use plastic which is already there in our rivers, which is already there in our roads. 40% of the wastage is still not collected properly. So what is this? There are techniques, new technology things where there is, without segregation, you can you can burn single-use plastic, but at such a temperature where there is no pollution. The acceleration of the temperature, this is discovered by some UNSW scientist, Indian scientist in UNSW, and they have already commercialized the process as green steel in Australia. So there are processes like that where you can fire composite wastes without creating pollution. Everywhere there is this thing, and there are ways how to increase our water resources. That is another important thing. With earthen tanks, for example, they are much cheaper. It takes these earthen tanks used to be there in the old ages, in the villages, etc. So we have lost all that. So we have to go back to that. So these are certain issues which we have to look forward to. I believe that there are solutions, only we should have the will to implement them.
Right.
And then there are some cross solutions also which is happening. For example, India is now, Saudi Arabia is investing $15 billion into petrochemical complexes in India. That is not going to be good. It's going to produce more plastics.
Okay, all right. Mr. Desai?
I would say that basically what I would say is that do not treat climate change simply as an environmental problem. Addressing climate change is a developmental challenge. And therefore, I would like to see a mission approach to decarbonization, which would really identify all of the spaces where one can decarbonize, and equally a very strong focus on adaptation measures when it comes to developmental work, but in Niti Aayog or in the Indian Council on Agricultural Research or anywhere else. So I would like to see these two twin prongs. One, a decarbonization mission, and two, a strong effort at adaptation, particularly on the science, technology and research side.
Absolutely. Chamli Singh, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
I would just like to add to whatever he's already commented. Of course, we had transitioned from mitigation to adaptation, but we've already lost a lot in the game to come over with climate change. That is an important pillar of loss and damage. That also has to be seen because there are so many non-economical losses which we have not been able to address, and climate change definitely should be taken as a mission mode to walk through the problem so as to come out victorious.
Okay, all right. On that note then, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. Message for all our viewers and others as well, that is important that we too do our bit as far as climate change is concerned and make a difference and be the difference. That's it from me. See you again next time.